So this morning, I want to share with you some of the teachings that have meant a lot to me from my dear friend and one of my teachers, Ram Dass. And so I will do that. But when I came in, Karen came up to me and said, "Have you heard about the bell ringing?" Which I had not heard about, which is that the National Cathedral in Washington at 3 p.m. today, which is noon our time, is going to be ringing their big bell saved for very, very, very special occasions to mark the 400th anniversary of the first slaves coming to Virginia, to our country. And there were 30 enslaved Africans coming from what is now Angola. And they were dropped off in Virginia and traded for supplies from the English colonists. And really that began what was 300 years of free labor of enslaved African people, on which the great wealth of our nation was built. I mean, imagine how much your business could make if you didn't have to pay anybody to work for you and could just produce lots and lots of stuff. So these folks were brought against their will, of course. And so the bell ringing is really to mark what will hopefully be a movement of healing from something that has haunted and discredited our nation. And so I thought if we could just stay 4 minutes past 12, I could ring the bell 108 times, which is a very Buddhist number. I don't even know why. I should know after all these years. But 108 is kind of a magic number. If anybody knows, does anybody know why? Well, yes, it's the number of beads on a mala, but why were there 108 beads on the mala? 108 desires. Letting go of 108 desires. Well, I think that's kind of like what my first teacher, the Korean Zen master, said when people would talk about Kensho or Satori or enlightenment, and he would say, there are 84,000 kinds of Kensho. Which one do you want? What did he mean by that, do you think? 84,000 was a number like 108 to connote many, many. And he was really saying there are so many moments, so many mind moments in our life when we can be present and awake and aware. And he's saying, so which one do you choose? So anyway, we will ring the bell 108 times, which should take, I think they were going to ring the bell for 4 minutes for the 4 centuries. And I do want to invite you to stay for that. And then as for the teachings that I plan to share with you this morning, I feel that Ram Dass, does everybody know who he is? Ram Dass was, I'll just tell you briefly, he was a professor at Harvard named Richard Alpert, and he was a psychologist and doing really interesting experiments to try to help people with different mental health issues, doing good work at Harvard as a psychologist. And then came the discovery of psychedelics, LSD in particular. And Richard Alpert and a colleague, Timothy Leary, began to do experiments with the LSD, and they saw that it was actually helping people in certain situations of trauma and mental illness and so forth, and people, especially people who were facing their death. But to make a very long story very short, this was unacceptable, and actually someone else who I won't name but is very famous today was instrumental in getting him fired from Harvard. They have since had a meeting, I think it was about 10 years ago, those two, for, I guess, a forgiveness and reconciliation meeting, because being fired from your professorship at Harvard is not a good thing to have happen in your life. He had a platform that was very authoritative, but he went on to decide, after his own experiences with psychedelics, that he wanted to develop a spiritual life that was not based on getting high and coming down. Because, as those of you know who have worked with plant medicines or psychedelics in your own lives, you do get high, and in that high there is a lot of potential for insight and understanding different dimensions of our consciousness that are not ordinarily available to us. There's also a lot of potential for not so good things happening, getting dependent on drugs and so forth. But no matter how much you feel you are reborn in heaven in those states, and and understand the Garden of Eden and what that meant, you always come down. It always ends. Just like our life, it's impermanent. But he wanted to find a way that was more sustainable, to have access to these more open-hearted and illuminated states of consciousness. And he went to India and found a guru there who turned out to be very extraordinary. It's not everybody's experience when you go to India, and lots of people, guru just means teacher. So that can be anybody, from the sidewalk to the most elevated temple, it can be anybody. And in the best sense, we're all each other's gurus when our hearts are open. But his guru really taught by radiating, by transmitting through the words and energy of his being, unconditional love. That was the teaching. He gave him the name Ram Das, which means servant of God. And God in this case is not pointing to any personified deity up in the sky or anywhere else, but to that source of unconditional love, which we all have in our hearts. It belongs to each one of us. And so Ram Das, he spent 6 months of intensive practice with his guru in India, and wrote a book called Be Here Now when he came back to the States. And I'm sure he went back and forth, but that book, Be Here Now, how many of you read that book back in the 70s? Well, some of you weren't alive. Let's say, how many of you have read that book? So that book has affected a lot of us. And for those of us who read it in the 70s, we all longed to have some of those experiences. And I know that for me, I was at that time a single mom when I read that book. And I mean, it's amazing. I was like 24 and already a divorced single mom. But that can happen. And I remember getting very carefully arranging for babysitters and deciding, yes, I'm going to try this LSD. And sure enough, I did. And sure enough, it definitely, as Aldous Huxley said, opened the doors of perception. And I did feel that I had seen God, and I really felt very touched and moved by the experiences that I had in that first time. And didn't do it many more times. I was a mom and working, and my life was not the life of, getting up and going to India and finding a guru. It was much more grounded and hardworking. And though I did do it a few more times, but some of the experiences that I had did inspire me to want to understand more about what this is, this life that we're involved in. And that's when I searched for a meditation teacher and found one. First I went to all these swamis and they would say eat artichokes and say this mantra soha, and it just wasn't right. And then, thanks to my dear friends and Dharma buddies, John Kabat-Zinn, we were childhood friends, and Larry Rosenberg, Larry found our first teacher, the Korean Zen master, Daesan Sanim, who was living in Providence, Rhode Island at that time. We were living in Cambridge. And then he came to Cambridge to study English at Harvard at the summer school and started a Zen center there. And that's where I began my Dharma practice. But the reason that Ram Dass, I think, has been one of the most influential people in terms of my own teaching is that he says all he really wanted to do in terms of his books and his teaching was share his journey. Just sort of take notes and report on what he was experiencing on his journey. And I think why I love him so much is that he is completely self-disclosing and honest about his own humanness and his imperfections. And he doesn't cover it up or hide. In fact, he often leads with stories about his own 108 desires and where they have led him, shall we say. And I mean, Andrea knows, she's done retreats with Ram Dass as well, and maybe some of you also have that I don't know, but he really is so much human who he is, and he, of course, people revere him as a guru, and what he says about that is he always has a picture of his guru, Maharaji, either behind him or on the table next to him. I mean, they're all over his house. His house looks like a temple when you walk in. And he always points to, if you say, oh, thank you, and this or that, or, I've learned this from you, or I love you, or you've taught me, he always points behind him or to the side of him and just points to his guru. And he says, Maharaji is the fisherman. He's fishing for our souls. We would say for our hearts, because in Buddhist, we don't talk about souls, but it's the same thing. He's fishing for our hearts. He says, you, all of us, are the fish, and I am the worm. So that's his stance as a teacher. He's the bait. That's all he is. And it really, I think, has helped him not get inflated and not start to believe his own advertising and fall into the pitfalls that so many teachers do. And, I recently had the chance to be there with him and stay at his house. And sometimes Jack and I go together and stay there. Always we do around the time that we teach a retreat with him, and usually one other time during the year. It's like a pilgrimage. And I love being there with Jack, but I actually love more being there by myself. It's kind of like getting to be the only child and getting all the attention. Jack tells his wonderful stories, and he entertains Ram Dass and everybody. And I get smaller and smaller and smaller. It's just something that happens, Not so much anymore, but it certainly was like that at the beginning, to the point where I had to say to Jack, could I just have 10 minutes alone with Ram Dass? And that's when we really bonded, in those 10 minutes. I'm not kidding, really. So I've had the chance to go back by myself, and I'm all joking aside, it's just quieter when I'm there by myself, so it can be more like a semi-retreat. And the house is very much, they call it a mini ashram. They call it an ashram. You walk in, I would say a Zen temple, but whatever you want to call it, Buddhist temple, Hindu ashram, church. You walk in and it feels like a holy space. There's a huge altar with all kinds of pictures. And Jack tells the story often of how there's a picture. It used to be George W. Bush. Then it was Dick Cheney. Then it was, John Boehner. Now it's Trump who's on the altar. And Ram Dass does that not because he reveres Trump, but because he doesn't want to forget his humanity in the reactivity to him. And so you walk in and it's like that. And Ram Dass is so disabled at this point. I forgot to say, in 1995 or 19, I don't remember the date exactly, somewhere later in the 90s, he had a stroke. It was actually 20 years ago. And he has been sitting in a wheelchair, completely half paralyzed, like right arm, right leg, hand, foot, but also right side of his throat. So sometimes swallowing is difficult. The just right side is completely paralyzed because when he had his stroke, he wasn't found for 6 hours. And if you have medical care right away, it really, really helps. But he didn't. So, and that's a story in and of itself. But so he's been sitting in that wheelchair with lots of discomfort, as you can imagine, pain and the illnesses that come from being in that situation for 20 years. And he's not, sure, he's a human being. Sometimes he's grumpy or grouchy, but basically he's not. Basically, he radiates so much love. He is so tenderized by his practice of being present with that experience 100%. And surrendering to it, learning from it, and sharing what he learns. So because of that, he needs so much care. He used to be able to walk a little with a walker, and he used to be able to use his good arm to help with transfers from the wheelchair to the bed and the toilet and so forth. It's all fallen apart. He's 88 and he can't do that anymore. So there really need to be 2 strong young men taking care of him at all times. And a third one has to be there too, because eventually, everybody needs a day off and somebody pulls a muscle in their back and, there need to be helpers all the time. And it's a difficult situation, actually, for everybody in the household for lots of reasons. His medical crises and people pulling their backs out and just all kinds of reasons. And yet everyone is practicing. We call it practice because as you saw from your own meditation, as you see from your own meditation practice, the mind is constantly, right, distracting us here, there, boom, 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 and we don't even know it. Honestly, I remember once at leading a retreat at IMS in Barrie and leading a guided meditation, and I started thinking about something and I completely forgot that I was sitting up in front of 100 people leading a guided meditation and just started thinking, just was like gone in my own story. And I don't know what people were thinking. They probably thought I was so deeply, silently in my meditation that was enough guidance, or who knows what they thought. But it was very humbling, that experience. So you see what happens. And where the mind goes. And often where it goes is not a very pretty sight. It can be very dystopian in there. And so the practice of coming back over and over and over just to see what it is, how it is, and to try to bring some kind of quiet and as tender as possible presence to what's happening. That practice, doing that over and over, means that in the crunch, and we will all have some crunch sooner or later, somebody will break up with us, we'll faint and have a heart attack or whatever happens to us. We will all have some kind of crunch, and you find out that it's there for you. You are there for you in that crunch because you've been doing this seemingly very mundane, bringing your mind back to the breath, come back to sensations of body, blah, blah. You've been doing this over and over and over, but then when it counts, it's there for you. And many of you have shared stories with me about how this is true in little tiny ways and in huge ways. I was supposed to have breakfast with a friend I had reconnected with from a while ago, and she basically wasn't there, and I called and she sounded really weird. And I said, well, were you sleeping or did you take a nap? Well, and then she just hung up. Well, I found out she actually, in that moment when I was having a major seizure, and is now in the hospital with some kind of mass in her brain. We don't know what it is. It's totally terrifying. She's a lot younger than I am, too. So, you know what I mean? You can be on your way to have breakfast with a friend. You don't know. We don't know. And yet, there she is in the hospital, not knowing, and full of love. I would say her moments of love alternate with her panic attacks, and then her moments of love, and then her panic. And then she said she and her husband are clinging to each other like rhesus monkeys, you know. And the daughter sent me a photo, or she sent me a photo her daughter took of them just like, hanging on to each other. And they have been practicing staying in their marriage for 30 some years and whatever, and they got married really young, and that is there for them. That love and attachment, positive attachment I'm talking about, strong good bond, is there for them. And it's the same with us. We practice being with ourselves, being present with ourselves, cutting ourselves some slack, bringing self-compassion to who we are and all our mind states, and then in the crunch, we are there for ourselves. We really can be. And that's what Ram Dass had practiced for decades before his stroke. And his practice and the practice of everybody in the household who takes care of him, they're living together. They're random people living together, and they have to get along and they have to work in a unified and harmonious way to take care of him. And you can feel that kind of practice when you walk into the house. You can feel that they are tenderized and they are trying hard. And you can feel the love and understanding in the atmosphere. Just like you can feel an atmosphere if you come late to the sitting. I'm not encouraging this, but it does happen to some of us sometimes. If you come late and you walk in, you can feel the atmosphere here. If you're sitting here and you're in the middle of it, it's ordinary. We don't notice it. But when you walk in, you can feel it. And that's what it's like at his house. I was having breakfast with him. And Ram Dass is very slow now. He's way slowed down. So he eats really, really slowly. And he'll sometimes just sit there with his breakfast without eating it. And then he has all these little pretty colored glasses full of herbal potions and things that he takes for this and that and the other thing. And he'll sip them slowly. He doesn't even eat his breakfast. I don't know about you, but if there is food in front of me, I hear this siren call to eat it, and all of it, like right away. I can't imagine sitting there and just not even eating it for a period of time. Maybe I will attain that when I'm 88. We'll see. And sitting there with him, sometimes I have sat with him for an hour and a half over his breakfast. And I don't say anything because I just love the atmosphere. Occasionally the thought will come through my mind, you should tell him some stories and make him laugh, like you know who. And my beloved, that that thought will come. But I actually like just sitting there and being quiet, and he does not need you to speak. He is completely comfortable with the silence. One of the things he struggles with is aphasia, which means difficulty retrieving words and getting them out. And so he's sharp. He's there. He understands. He's right with you when you talk about anything, but he can't always respond in a timely fashion, and it's gotten slower. So he has learned. When he first began to speak after his stroke, he taught everybody how. I remember seeing him once in those days, went to hear him speak at Agape, and he taught us all how to be comfortable with the pauses, with the silences. Because when you go to hear somebody give a talk, you expect them to talk. And if they stop talking, it can make it can be a nervous moment, like, oh, when's he going to find the word, or and he just puts, in those days he would explicitly put everybody at ease so that we would just meditate during the pauses. So I was sitting with him in silence having breakfast, and that day he was having breakfast on the balcony outside the room upstairs. His bedroom is upstairs, and then there's a room where he just spends most of his time, and the windows look out over this grass and then just sort of wild land, and then in the distance the ocean. So he can see the sky and the clouds and the ocean. And so he was sitting there, and I came upstairs, and he motioned, a welcome gesture to sit down, and I did. And then we just looked around. He's on Maui. He can't, he's on the island of, he's in Hawaii. And we're looking at this beautiful scene, and I said, wow, 5-star. This is a 5-star place. And he said, yeah, 5-star. Then we just sat there quietly in the 5 stars for quite a long time. And then I noticed, and these are the things that we notice with our meditation, that my mind had gotten so quiet and everything was so beautiful when I wasn't commenting about it all full time. And I felt so touched that we have this practice that shows us this possibility, that we can be like this. And sometimes when we're in a crisis, and a couple weeks ago, some of you were sharing things, especially like Robert and Clark were sharing about your son in some trouble at that time. And in a crisis like that, your mind isn't going to like drop into luminous silence. Mostly, it's going to be worrying and thinking and wondering and churning. But we can be with that too, with some peacefulness. Okay, of course, the mind is churning right now. How could it be otherwise? So this is just a little bit of what I wanted to share with you. It's not his teachings per se. It's more just been my experience of having the blessing of being there and being in his presence. And, if we ever think we can't bear it, we can just think of somebody like that. This is I want to read you something. It's from a little book called Life Support by Judith Margolis. And she's an artist who made very beautiful drawings and paintings of her mom while her mom was dying. And then she wrote this book. She just made these really beautiful drawings of her mom in the hospital, and then her father sitting by her mom in the hospital. And she just told the story, very ordinary story of being with her mom while she was dying, and her fear and her love and her resentment. And she says, juggling all the different aspects of my life, teaching, worrying about money, pressure to write my graduate thesis, near terror about finishing the paintings for my exhibition, deadlines on the animation job, plus being a mom and wife and chores for Shabbat and holidays and just normal things. When do I get time to just be? I barely have time to go to the bathroom. And throughout is the heavy shadow of my mother's illness, like a large cloud darkening every day. I feel guilty if I'm just having a good time, because I think, how can I be enjoying myself when she can't enjoy even the simplest things? And then I think, how petty for me to feel crabby about family concerns or cranky about my work. At least I have a life. Gratitude takes all kinds of forms, We take it where we find it. So I want to just open up now for some about some conversation together and some dialogue. And before I do that, I also just want to say that this place and the teachings that we receive here from me and from all the good teachers who've been here. I didn't get to hear Mike last week because I wasn't here, but I heard he was good. And there's always something really good to be learned, if only the pleasure of coming to practice meditation together and refueling for our practice on our own the rest of the week. And this is all made possible, really, by your generosity. We have programs and program fees and speakers and so forth. And the revenue from all that does cover probably 75% of InsightLA's expenses. Just to rent this studio to come and do nothing in it, I mean, it's crazy what it costs each month. So I do want to make a plea for you to remember to make an offering when you leave, to remember to press the donate button. And in the meantime, and to consider whether you want to match what's given any Sunday morning just for fun or part of it. And in the meantime, just to remember to be grateful that we get to do this and be here together. And also, live stream friends, if you have questions or comments, please type them in and Angela will read them to us. So this is a time for all of you. Yes, Karen. Can you pass the mic? Thank you.
Hello. 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 I wanted to say a little bit more about the bell ringing, but
how much more? Go ahead.
But actually, first, when I was meditating, I was so taken by this desire that I wanted to tell you that I get so many emails every week, and I always put a little check next to two that I don't want to miss out on reading them. One of them is yours, your weekly update.
Oh, thank you.
And the other one is Arma Magudi or something. She writes something for The Guardian. It's called The Week in Patriarchy, and it is delicious. And when you were just talking...
Unless you're a patriarch, right?
Sorry?
I said unless you're a patriarch.
Exactly. And while you were sitting there talking about Ram Dass and Jack and feeling this big and whatever, I thought there's some reason I was meant to say that those are my two favorite things to read.
Yes.
It's an incredible column for anybody should check it out, The Week in Patriarchy.
Thank you.
As far as the bell ringing goes, I on the way here, I was running late. Otherwise, I wouldn't have heard this. And what NPR said, which was slightly different from what you said, was just that you mentioned that the DC
and churches all around the country.
Well, that's what that's what
yes.
NPR said, that you might hear some bells ringing, and it's that everybody is being asked to ring their bells at 3 p.m. Eastern. Churches everywhere, and I just thought, oh my God, I'm on my way to church and we have a bell. I have to. So that's what it's about. It's not just that one church.
Yeah,
they were expecting to hear bells ringing.
Yeah, thank you. I meant to say that.
And I wanted to ask something, and you can not answer, but as we were talking about that, I just looked around and the room we're so overwhelmingly white here. There are people of color, but there's
oh, good, thank you.
Nobody,
I was going to mention that too. There's not one African American person in this room.
There was for a moment.
If I can see.
Thank you.
Yay.
There wasn't before.
And not only that, Bintu is not even. Her family is from Senegal originally, although she came here from France. But
I would love it. I wanted to mention that.
You snuck in. I didn't even see you. Yeah. Well, this is the legacy of our segregation and, frankly, American apartheid of the past. That we don't have neighborhoods where we are integrated with each other. We have a center that is situated in a very white area, and here we are. And if you are a person of color, but especially, if you walk into, all you have to imagine is walking into a room where you're the only white person and everybody else is black. And it might be that you don't feel any discomfort, but you'd be aware of it. You'd be aware of it. Yeah, thank you very much. Anybody with a question or a comment? And Angela, you'll let us know if, yeah.
Trudy, do you happen to know, did Ram Dass ever even spend him when the stroke happened? Was there any human sense of why me, why now? I'm doing some good here. Why on earth would this fall on me?
Oh, sure. You should read his books. He's very open about the feelings that he had that were less than spiritual and noble, or you know what I mean? Anything is spiritual if you're bringing that attention to it. But yeah, definitely. He's very open about his humanness, Rick. I think you would enjoy reading. He does talk about what he went through, especially in a book called Still Here, which was his first book after the stroke. Now, at that time, he was also more able to do more than he can now, because that was 20 years ago. But yeah, I think you might really enjoy that book. It's called Still Here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Ellen.
Thank you so much for your lead and everything you said. I don't know how to find it now, but a couple of years ago I was very ill, and on Netflix, Ram Dass had a big program, and it was wonderful. He just spoke, and it showed where he lived, and it was so healing just watching it. I don't know what it's called, but I think you could find.
Was it a movie? Was it a movie called Fierce Grace?
I don't remember the name.
I think so. And there's another movie.
It was only him. There was nobody else.
No, that's not Fierce Grace. I don't know what that is. But you can find things on the Be Here Now, Love, Serve, Remember website.
I didn't know there was all that.
Metta Institute. There's lots available, lots and lots on YouTube. There's a movie called Fierce Grace, and since Barbara Streisand is not here this morning, I will recommend that movie. And I will also recommend a movie called Going Home. Beautiful movie. The filmmaker, it's really about Ram Dass today. And it's in his home, and it shows him going about his life and facing his death. And it's called Going Home.
He's very active
On
on Instagram.
Instagram, there's a lot. He's all over the internet. You can find a lot. And last Tuesday night, there was a movie that was shown at Google, a new movie about Ram Dass called Becoming Nobody.
Oh.
And I'll talk about that another time, because that's a big part of his teaching. Another element that I'll talk about next time.
Thank you. That's great. And I'd just like to ask for anyone who would want to say a prayer for my friend who just had, in the crunch, back surgery. So anyone who
we'll take a moment while I would say that when we do the bell ringing at the end, this would be a time to send love to everyone who's hurting.
Okay.
Right now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a very interesting experience this morning. I've been here a few times before. I don't live in LA, but I'm privileged to come here when I visit. And thank you. It was amazing and timely for me. My mind was very chaotic because I'm very much in crisis right now about my daughter who is in crisis, or I'm just in crisis about my daughter who doesn't think she's in crisis, but she'll find out she's in crisis pretty soon because I may pull her out of college. And she just started and she's not ready. So I'm sitting here and my mind is just crazy. And I'm like lost in story and chaos and catastrophe scenes and, what if she hurts herself and all this kind of stuff. But then I just got to the place of acceptance that you've referred to and thought this is just my prayer. I'm just praying right now. And I'm letting all this it was like thinking in tongues because it was so
Yes,
crazy,
that's
you know?
beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm like thinking in tongues and just thinking like, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because
It's beautiful.
I'm sending her energy
Yeah.
and I'm sending her love.
And you're her mom.
Yeah. And grief is love and anxiety about this is love. And it all just translates back to that. So
Yes.
I guess
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to share that.
I think that's probably helpful to other people in this room right now. Thank you.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah. And then Carol.
Maybe I'll check out some of these Ram Dass resources, but and this is kind of open ended. But recently I've been dealing with an illness, and it's not life threatening or anything, but
Good.
I feel like I have no vocabulary to deal with it,
Yes.
and especially when I'm sure this is a million of people have dealt with this, but you try so many different things and they don't work, and you're not sure what's going on. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I struggle to deal with even talking to myself about it. So if you could just say a couple words.
Well, first of all, I just want to cheer you on for your courage to talk about it. Since you have trouble facing it and talking about it with yourself, to talk about it with all of us takes a lot of guts, and I really appreciate that, because anytime anybody offers something from the heart that they're dealing with in a very open and honest way, it helps everybody. It helps other people. Maybe not everybody, but it helps other people for sure. So it's an act of generosity. And, in terms, you're in new territory. You're young. You haven't been, you've never dealt with an illness that's ongoing, which I'm guessing this is, at least for now. And so it's brand new. And it's kind of like you've never lived on this planet before, right? So I think, first of all, just to cut yourself some slack and realize, whoa, I just was catapulted onto whatever this planet is. And I got to look around and get my bearings and find the words to talk to myself and others about what's going on. And what can be helpful is doing just what you're doing, practicing meditation, because you're strengthening your own intuition. And I don't know how this works. I just know that it does work. That as you meditate and as you train yourself to not be completely lost in the discursive thinking mind, you begin to access other dimensions of who you are. And it may not even be a conscious thing, but suddenly you'll notice more synchronicity in your life. Like you'll think of somebody and whoop, there's a text from that person. Or, things like that start to happen more often. Or you'll notice that you just are drawn to do something. You don't even know why. But if you, assuming that something isn't an unhealthy or unwise thing to do, if you follow that, and you're strengthening your intuition, and it begins to tell you what you need to know. You start to find the words, they'll pop into your mind. Also, there is a thesaurus on your computer, but they'll pop into your mind. So to come here and be in community with people and practice together, it's going to help you whether you get well or you don't. You know what I mean? It's going to serve you hugely in your life. So that's the first thing, to just keep practicing, find a class. There's a young people's group on Sunday nights. If you want to come back tonight, you can find it on the website. What time is it? 7 or it meets at 7. So you might want to come to the young adults group too. And there's lots, like you said, there's lots of people who have been in this situation. And it may not be a club you ever want to be part of. Most of us, don't want to be part of the worried moms. Should I pull my kid out of college? We don't want to be in that club, any of us. But we find ourselves there because life is like that. It has ups and downs. And what we practice here is how to keep our hearts steady through the ups and downs. And it doesn't mean what Rick was pointing to. It doesn't mean that our hearts don't get freaked out and that we don't have thoughts like self-pitying thoughts and why me and, all those kinds of not just human thoughts. It means that we can bring some awareness, some loving awareness, and that's the steadiness. We go through whatever we go through. It doesn't mean we don't have the ups and downs. It's like we learn to be more steadily present with them in a kind way. And that makes all the difference. So just keep doing this, and I promise you, what you need will start to appear. This is kind of magic. Yeah, magic of the Dharma.
Thank you, Trudy. And thank you, everybody, for helping to support me through very difficult times. I send metta to your friend who's in the hospital right now.
Thank you.
I have such a wonderful picture of her husband and her clinging to each other. And here I am, 35 years down the road, with my darling husband who's still slowly proceeding to the end of his life with Parkinson's and dementia. And I was standing at his bedside last night, considering this truth about clinging brings more pain and suffering. And so the image of your couple in hospital clinging to each other, and me standing at Owen's bedside, wondering whether I would have the strength to be with him when he takes his last breath, and how to not cling. It is such a difficult practice for me, but I do see that the clinging does bring more suffering.
That's all you need to see. That's all you need to see right now.
Right.
Because when we're deeply attached, by definition, we are going to cling to that person. And sometimes that clinging is a loving, positive thing. And sometimes it brings pain. If they've rejected and divorced us, if they've abandoned us to death, if they've, it can bring pain. And seeing that is all you need to do right now. You're not going to stop clinging to Erwin, right? You adore him. And this is terrible. But just seeing that, that's what you are being taught. And it's a tough lesson.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true. And there's something about truth that is comforting, even when it's awful.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
And in the moment of equanimity, the low is so low and my high is so high. USC has asked if our Fifth Dementia Band will come and play and entertain on campus on October the 1st, celebrating United Nations International Day of Older Persons. And they're sending a bus for 30 of us, Fifth Dementia caregivers and friends, to come on campus to celebrate the day with them by entertaining them all at the conference.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Yeah.
Equanimity in action.
Yeah. Yeah. Very extreme times. Extreme. Thank you. Just want to check the time. Okay, we're good. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
So grateful to be here.
I'm glad
I too
you're here.
don't live close. And I wasn't supposed to be here today. I was supposed to be on a bike ride with a friend who canceled. And that's why I'm here. And so about a month ago, my ex had a stroke, and his two children.
Can you put the mic a little closer to your mouth? Thank you.
Our two children have so much stepped up to be with him.
Wonderful.
And I realize in listening, I've been there too, which has been hard because we're no longer together, and he kind of thinks we are. But as I sit there and I remember the times that were good times, I'm grateful that I get to be with him. I don't know how much longer he'll be here. Could be days, months, years. I just know that in the moment, and it's because of this practice, that I can actually sit there. And yes, I do have a little bit of kind of reactions when he thinks that we're still together, and
Sure.
then I think that it's just not about me.
That's right.
It's about him and
Beautiful.
about what he needs from us to live out whatever, part of his life is going to. And because of this practice, I know that that's where I'm at. So I thank you, and I'm glad I'm here today because I really heard some beautiful things.
Thank you. Isn't it? See, this is what I meant about life will take you where you need to go. She thought she was going on a bike ride, but actually she needed to be here today. And yeah, thank you. Thank you. Judith says something about that in her book too. She says, it's surprising who has disappeared. Relatives and friends who never turned down an invitation to my mother's table have stopped calling. I'm shocked. And many of the people who do come talk nonstop, jabbering on automatic pilot while my mother lies silent. Instead of just asking my father what he needs and how he feels, or just staying with her quietly, which is what I know she would like best. But to stay there quietly takes practice. Like I was saying, even sitting with Ram Dass, and I've been practicing most of my adult life. When it's been an hour and a half and the porridge is only half eaten and the restlessness arises in my mind, or the thoughts of I should be telling him stories and entertaining him and da-da-da-da. This is our practice, learning how to sit quietly, be with ourselves, and then, like you're finding out, be with each other when it's hard. So thank you. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have something you'd like to ask about or share? So the question I'm going to repeat because otherwise live stream folks can't hear it. The question is Ram Dass still swimming in the ocean? And the answer is yes. He went in last week and he goes into the ocean. It's just fantastic, the effort that it takes and that people do it. And it's kind of it's a community event on Maui. All of the community, they call it their satsang. They come and swim around Ram Dass, and he has to go in. You can imagine, how do you get in a wheelchair in the sand? You can't. So he has this wheelchair with giant rubber wheels that is designed to go on the sand. They have to carry it to the sand. It's just a whole thing. And then they wheel him down to the ocean, and this chair, it can go into the water. So it's where there aren't big waves, obviously. And the chair goes into the water, and then he starts to float. And then his main companion, Dasima, will kind of like, she has to steer him because he can only swim with one side. So he would just go in circles if she wasn't steering him. And then he has a vest that floats him, and they float out. And, I don't know, reasonably far out, certainly way over our heads. And then everybody, somebody brings usually a baggie full of flowers. And then everybody throws flowers. And Ram Dass says, when he gets out there, he says, "Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy." He's just in heaven, he's just blissed out. He's weightless. He can move, he's weightless. He's like, "Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy." And then he says, "Oh joy, oh joy, oh joy, oh joy." And everybody joins and says that too. Then they have this chant. I don't think I can remember it, but it's something like, no, it's like, this is the community, something like, this is the community of fun. If it's not fun, if it's fun, do it. If it's not fun, don't do it. But it's more poetic than that. Yeah, and make it fun. Yeah, there's something, anyway, it's fun and everybody says it together. and he stays in the water for a while. It's Hawaii, so it's not freezing. And he has his vest thing on. So when he's sick, obviously he can't go in, and there's lots of weeks when he can't go in. But yes, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to share because I was there at the last retreat, and I was so looking forward to I've seen a lot of the movies and read, and he's sort of an idol of mine, and I was so looking forward to that ocean swim. And there was a lot of really riptides. And actually, I'd gone in one morning, even though you weren't supposed to, and almost couldn't get back in, and it was very scary. And so they canceled that, and I was so bummed. And we ended up going in the pool instead. And it ended up being beautiful because we were all so close together. And someone started singing "Row, row, row your boat," and it became this round with Ram of singing "Row, row, row your boat," which actually ended up being very, very beautiful. And I think in the ocean it would have been difficult spread out and with everything. So, you just never know when you think life is giving. You're like, oh, I didn't get to do it, and then something even more beautiful comes up. And I just wanted to share too. I'm so glad that I'm here today. I started work pretty recently with hospice, which has been very much inspired by Ram Dass in a lot of the readings, and also to get out of my own obsession with my own stuff. And the woman I'm sitting with is amazing, and she lived through the Holocaust, but I find myself wanting to hear her tell me stories, right? I want to hear stories and
You want her to entertain you.
yes. And she does tell stories, but she'll tell like 2 seconds of the same story over and over again.
Oh,
Like
you never get to hear the end?
No, last week, it's not even really, like she'll just pick parts. Like last week she was obsessed about her house being warm and that it was a great house because it provided heat. And I would try and steer the conversation past that. And occasionally she would talk about her dad and dancing, but she kept coming back to the house and the heat. And so this was a great talk because it's given me a little insight and I usually go Saturdays, but I'm going right after this to just sit and listen and to stop trying to control the outcome or where the story goes or what she says, and just to be with her and let her tell me about the heated house or whatever it is this week over and over. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Have you read the latest book that Ram Dass and Mirabai Bush wrote together?
I have not.
Called Walking Each Other Home. Stories of Facing Death and Dying. It's a beautiful book.
I have not.
If you're, it might really be nice.
Yeah, I've read almost everything, so I haven't.
And also to listen to her, you can listen to her with your, your poet's ear, where you would hear her talking about the warmth of her house, and she is going home to die, and it's maybe her way of reassuring herself she will be warm in some soul way, because obviously she won't have a body, but maybe what she's talking about has to do with more than just little scraps of random, you know what I mean, why those memories or those little random bits are coming forward at this time. They have some meaning, like I'm safe and warm. So you can listen that way too, and it might be that you actually piece together a bit of a story from those scraps. It might be more like a poem than a linear story. But
yeah, that's I'm going to keep that in mind. It's also very interesting because doing so much work on staying in the present moment and then being with someone who is in their present moment, but it's not this present moment. Right? Like her present moment is a different present moment. Yes. And she's very in it, but it's not necessarily linear.
It's not the one you're sharing.
Yes. It's been very interesting. So
yeah. And it raises big questions, more than we have time for now. Like, are we ever really in the same moment together? When we're thinking, and it's really interesting to look at that. Yeah. Thank you. I want to remember, please, Robert. And then that's it.
Hi. I have been, when I meditate sometimes, it's less about getting lost in other thoughts and more just about restlessness in the moment and feeling, when's this going to end? Oh, I shouldn't be thinking that. All right, let's not think that. And I just am just trying to follow the breath and follow the breath. I don't, it's sometimes not relieving. I don't get to that place, but I'm sticking with it, and I've been sticking with it all this time.
Yeah,
but I don't always I don't go to the floating place as often as I would like.
Well, I'm not surprised. You shared with us that you guys
this is not only
going through a hard time.
This is not only recent. I mean, this is.
But most of us, I think most people, and this is actually the perfect segue into what I wanted to say next, so thank you. Most people who are practicing on a daily basis, even diligently, um, unless they're practicing like 2 hours a day or something, they're not going to get to that quiet, deep place that often. Mostly it's going to be kind of digesting and metabolizing the events of your life and being present with that. And it can be busy. But I said chaotic and brilliant minds because it has its own brilliance. Like the mind is, working on things. And what I want to say is that if you can swing it, try to go to retreat because that's when you can really sort of boost your practice. And I'm going to make a very specific pitch for a retreat that I'm teaching. And I don't usually do that, but it's the last retreat I'm going to teach for a year until 2021. That's more than a shorty, just a few days. In the desert, not far from here, barely 2 hours in the Lucerne Valley, which is about 75 miles, I don't know, north or northeast, thank you, of Palm Springs. There's a strange and wonderful retreat center where we're having an 8-night, 7-day retreat, September 8th through 15th. And it is the last retreat that I'm going to teach for a year like that. And that's for 2 reasons. One is I really want to write my book. And when I keep going and teaching retreats, it's just a very big, wonderful effort, but it's just not conducive with what I need to be doing. And the other is that Jack doesn't want to teach them for a while anyway, maybe anymore, I don't know. And if I this year I'm teaching, like the rest of this year I have a 1 week. Anyway, if I'm gone, we just don't see each other because we have a long distance marriage and then it makes it too hard. So if you can possibly swing a retreat, it takes planning and it takes money, although we do have some limited funds to support people who really want to do it but can't swing it. I want to encourage you to do that. It's a very different experience from your daily practice. How many of you have had the blessing, the privilege of being able to sit a residential retreat of at least a week? Do you agree with me that it's very different and helps your daily practice? Yeah. Well, what can you say? Does anybody disagree? Let's put it that way. If you dare disagree. No. Oh, Lucerne Valley also is luxurious, you guys. There's a swimming pool and a hot tub. So that is unique among retreat centers. It's very luxurious there. So if you think that going on retreat means you're going to be, in a dorm with 8 other people, or no, not there. It's really nice. And the desert is beautiful. So do you think you could swing doing a retreat? Come sit with us. You'll see the difference.
Nice invitation.
Yeah. Would you let him go? Would you let him go?
Happily.
Where do I sign?
Oh, it's noon. So let's send our metta and our karuna, our loving kindness and compassion. And I do not have a mala, and I'm horrible with numbers, but this is going to be approximately 108 times. I'm going to try my best. This 1619 project that is happening now, the 400th anniversary, is a real bright spot on the landscape of our country. So let's sit together for a moment. At the end of a period of study and practice together, we express our appreciation for the privilege of getting to do this, study these teachings and practice them in the company of each other, by offering the goodness of our practice to all beings everywhere without exception. May we and all beings love, serve, and remember. And I want to give a shout out to Nicole Hannah-Jones and all those who've worked on this project called the 1619 Project of commemorating the 400 years since the beginning of slavery. Because and I want to encourage you to read and listen to whatever you can about this project, because it just gives you hope and heart for our democracy. So thank you, everybody. I'll see you next week.